when I come to a place like Envision and I give a talk and there's people sitting down in the jungle with pad and pen saying that they came here specifically to learn, that's why I'm here.
All right, here we are. First podcast of our Envision schedule. My name is Julian. We're here with the Freedom Culture podcast. Today I'm interviewing Derrick Broze from Houston, Texas, freelance journalist, and so many different hats you wear. Welcome, Derrick.
Hey, thanks for having me, brother. I'm excited to be here with Freedom Culture, Envision. It's time to share some ideas.
Yeah, beautiful. Just an honor to have your time, because you're at Envision, you're here to have a great time, to meet new people, to celebrate, to connect with the influencers and the make happeners, like the people that actually take action in the jungle. Yeah. So thanks for sitting down with me. Derrick, I just want to ask you like a first question right off the get-go. Why do you go to permaculture farms like Punta Mona or to places like Envision? Like, what's that about for you?
Yeah, so for me, these events, Punta Mona, Envision, it's absolutely about learning, about gaining the skills that I need to live the life that is in line with my values. You kind of mentioned of all the things going on here, I could be celebrating, jamming music, whatever, and that's all good, but honestly, I'm here to learn. I'm here to share the message that I've been working on developing and promoting the last 8 years. And like you said, to connect with people who are also interested in making change, because I get invited to speak at a lot of different events. I've been to different farms and different communities, and there's a lot of beauty there. And I also notice that sometimes people get caught up in just the celebratory aspect,
totally,
and sometimes forget about the purpose-driven aspect of it, which is, when I come to a place like Envision and I give a talk and there's people sitting down in the jungle with pad and pen saying that they came here specifically to learn, that's why I'm here. You know what I mean? That fills my heart with joy, because it's like, yeah, I'm going to have a good time either way, but if nobody's here to listen and to grow and connect together, then it kind of defeats the purpose of me being here. So yeah, that's why I come here, man. I come to learn from others, to share the message that I have to, and of course to connect and network and see how we can collaborate to change the world, really. That's what that might sound kind of cliche or trite, but honestly, that's why I do the things I do.
Dude, same here.
Nothing less.
Isn't it so the time for massive action on a collaborative level at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of what I speak about in my talks, is I constantly try to remind people, whether I'm speaking at Envision or, just whatever type of event it is. Like a lot of different events I speak at are promoted as transformational and things of that sort. And I try to reinforce to people that, what really matters is what you do when you go home. Because whatever you do throughout the weekend, whether you sit and listen to podcasts or you hear talks or you take drugs or you party and dance, whatever, do your thing. But what really matters is when on Monday and Tuesday, when people start going home and flying home, if they go home to the same old thing, then nothing changes.
Boom.
But if we
Fucking
actually
love that,
take the ideas and people are like, okay, I'm going home, I got a plan, I'm going to just start taking these steps, I'm going to actually start moving towards my goals, not just dreaming about them, then we're going to collectively actually change things, because there's people from literally all over the world
over the world here.
So it's a great opportunity to take that energy back and that momentum and do something with it.
I totally agree. I think, this separation between the leisure life and the work life, or the spiritual life and the work life, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like what you do every day is who you are.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we can have a conscious break or a few days where we just take it easy, but
some self-care.
Yeah, self-care, self-love, celebration, get to know some new friends. But what we do on a daily basis is how we show up in this world, and when we work together, things are better.
Absolutely. A lot of what I promote, my message and my talk this weekend at Envision, is about what I call holistic activism, and that is really about trying to distinguish between what people have traditionally seen as activism, which in my view is very reactionary. There's a action happening over here, let's go protest it over here, let's run over this way, it's very reactionary. You're spending your time and energy responding to the powers that be, if you will, right? The various forces, be they corporate, governmental, whatever, as opposed to saying, what can I do in a proactive way to change things, right? And so
holistic activism.
Holistic activism or holistic anarchism is what I promote, and those words have meaning. Holistic is really to look at the whole picture, right? So it's not just about what are the corporations up to, what are the governments up to, but how are you treating people in your interpersonal relationships, the type of money you use as well as where you spend it, the type of food you eat as well as the source of that and all that goes into getting it on your plate. All of these different things are important and play a role. and changing the world. So yeah, I think that the more people start thinking holistically and start looking at the picture in that way of seeing how can we be proactive. And as you said, it's not just about separating kind of the spiritual from the work. To me, activism and the evolution, the revolution, it's in the day-to-day actions. It's in the conversation that we have, these kinds of things right here. It's not just about going on Instagram or going on stage and promoting a kind of persona or wearing the right costume or making sure you got the right fashion, whatever.
Right.
But it's about actually living these things. And that's kind of the bulk of what my message focuses on, is really trying to get people to have consistency between their words and their actions.
I love that, Derrick. I think this is exactly where I'm at in my life as well, is like closing the value gap between what I talk about and what I do. Certainly been on this for years, but like more and more, and bring more people with me in that sense, or find more people and drop my own agenda.
Sure.
To really realize, are we going to the same direction? Because if we do, we better do it together.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of forces in this world or this universe that have different agendas that might not be holistic, and I don't believe in a not holistic future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people doing great work and perhaps focused on very specific areas of the picture, right? And they're doing good things in their genre or whatever, however you want to say it. But ultimately, I do think if we're not thinking holistically, if we're not thinking about the full picture and the full scope of our actions, because again, there are people I know who they know philosophy and what the government's up to in politics like the back of their hand, but perhaps in their diet, they're also contributing to the destruction of their planet. Or in their interpersonal relationships, they treat people like crap. Or maybe they have a really negative self-talk with their own self, So it's all important to take that into consideration. And over the years, I've called that the conscious resistance. That's what my website is, theconscioussresistance.com. My book trilogy is called The Conscious Resistance. But in the last 2 years, I've started to refer to it as holistic activism and just elaborate on what that means exactly, and try to share that message to just, again, help people see if we have big goals, your goal is to have a sustainable community, a Punta Mona or something, right? If your goal is to get off the grid, your goal is to just live healthier, even as simple as I want to lose 10 pounds by the end of the summer so I can go to the beach and feel good about myself. But then you see in your daily habits, you're not taking any concrete steps, then you will never achieve that. So if you haven't, even done a first search on what is an intentional community or what is permaculture, whatever your goals are, then don't expect to achieve those goals,
I love that. Derrick, I want to ask you another question. I know you just recently created a documentary, a movie, and I want to hear kind of how that furthers this message of holistic activism that you're already spreading in the world.
So yeah, that's a good question. The interesting thing, so you mentioned in the beginning, I am a journalist in addition to doing public speaking and writing books and trying to come up with philosophical solutions and practical solutions. For me, the role that my journalism plays, I've been involved in freelance journalism in Houston and around the U.S. for the last 6 or 7 years. I didn't go to school for journalism. I just taught myself. I've learned from a lot of really other skilled people, and over the years I've realized that I have a knack for research and for finding information, and I enjoy it. So I typically see my journalistic work, which focuses on surveillance technology, in indigenous struggles, corporate and state corruption, and shining a light on some of those, quote unquote, darker elements of society. I see that as serving the purpose of helping people see that there are problems. So then when they recognize, holy crap, I didn't know this was going on, I can also present them with my other work and say, here are the solutions. Think about this holistically. What can we do, right? So with that in mind, the documentaries are part of that, to try to expose people to some of these darker things. And in the last 6 months, I've started to focus more on doing mini documentaries, 15 to 20 minutes, but the most recent one ended up turning into a full hour-length documentary. And it's kind of an obscure topic. It's also kind of a dark topic that is not like the most fun thing to share to people, but it's also important. It's called Who Will Find What the Finders Hide. And
Who Will Find What the Finders Hide.
Yeah, and it's, as I said, it's really kind of obscure, but it's also, I think, relevant to a lot of things going on. And again, about, kind of exposing people to some of the, shining the light in the dark corners of our society. Because as you said, some people have different agendas, right?
Totally.
Do
you want to give us a short, call to action? Where can people find that, and what's like the short synopsis?
Yeah, I'll give you the short rundown of it. You can find it at theconsciousresistance.com, which is my website, or our YouTube channel, also The Conscious Resistance. But essentially, the Finders is a cult that was active in the 70s and 80s in the U.S. and in Germany and Australia and perhaps other places. In 1987, two men were arrested with 6 children in Florida, and it became international news. These men were accused of human trafficking, child trafficking. They were accused of I mean, a range of things from Satanism to pedophilia to human trafficking, and there was a potential tie to the CIA, the American intelligence community. And within 6 days, the story went from being mainstream headlines to being gone, and it was essentially just, like I said, was New York Times front page news, and within 6 days they said, oops, we made a mistake, there's nothing to see here.
Wow.
And that was in 1987. It disappeared for 30 years. But as of 2018, new documentation has been released through Freedom of Information request.
Yeah.
And last year I started to dig into it, and basically it led me down a really deep rabbit hole where I ended up interviewing former law enforcement officers involved, interviewing former members of the cults, and putting together a very in-depth kind of more of like a true crime type piece that looks at like who was this organization, who was the people that founded it, and what really happened basically. And so like I said, it gets into some really intense areas, but I do think that the work that I've been able to do over the last 8 months on that topic is probably the most up-to-date, complete look at that. And the reason I think it's relevant in 2019, now,
tell us.
31 years later, is because some of those people are still in power, the people that kind of covered up this crime, and some of the people that were involved in that cult are also still around. So in my view, if there, like any issue, if there was enough noise, there could be a chance for actually holding people accountable. Because, I mean, not to spoil the documentary, but it definitely does. I found pretty clear evidence of a cover-up. And that kind of leads down some really scary roads.
Yeah, seems like this is still kind of the reality we're kind of just emerging out of, this cover-up, black ops, CIA, FBI, however you call them, KGB, just governmental kind of intelligence. So let me switch the topic slightly, but kind of just the evolution or the revolutionary evolution of that for me is freedom culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does freedom culture really feel like in your heart?
Yeah, so whenever I was first invited to come be a part of this and come through here again, I checked out the Freedom Culture website, and right away I told Mark, this seems very in line with what I do, namely because right on the Freedom Culture website it says it's time for a decentralized revolution. And if there are key components of what I promote, as I mentioned, holistic activism, exposing kind of the darkness, but also localization and decentralization, trying to get people that we see institutions, be that corporations who are destroying the environment or, controlling the food supply, or say governmental organizations covering up dark things like that. To me, the answer is to opt out, to unplug from these centralized systems and to support emerging decentralized technologies, localized communities, permaculture, to decentralize from the food supply, to decentralize from government itself, and decentralize from the central banking and from fiat currency. So that's why, I support technologies like crypto and blockchain and 3D printing and a lot of emerging technologies, as well as really practical things like permaculture, and as well as kind of focusing on our internal traumas and our internal healing. My shirt here is a quote from my first
I was
book.
just reading it. I love your shirt, man.
Yeah, so this is...
Revolution without healing is a recipe for disaster.
And that's kind of the other component of my work, is in addition to exposing the darkness and promoting the solutions, I do think that all of that is incomplete unless we are working on our own internal traumas. And, I'm a former drug addict. I've been addicted to several drugs. I went to prison 15 years ago now, and that's where I discovered meditation. That's what first set me on this path before I ever got into activism and journalism. And so it's very key to my message, because I know that until we work on those internal things, it's very difficult to look at the world and say, how can I fix this, if you can't even get past your own stuff, right? So,
dude, give us some more of your life hacks there, because if that's 15 years ago that meditation found you, in whichever circumstance that was maybe shocking at the moment, but how do you practice this ancient saying of know thyself?
Yeah, know thyself. That's key, right? Self-awareness is the first step on what I call the sevenfold path of the holistic activist. Like self-awareness, and in order to have the ability to reflect. So I went to prison after being addicted to crystal meth for 10 months, and within that 10 months from day one of trying it, I lost my job, lost my apartment, lost my relationship, homeless, sleeping on the streets, going through all crazy stuff, and in prison just within 10 months, right? And when I got there, I just started to ask myself, what the heck just happened? It felt like such a blur. And also I was, on a lot of different drugs. I was also very depressed at that time. I got arrested the week before I turned 21, so I'm 34 years old now. And that was when I first started to really think about self-reflection and self-awareness and mindfulness, because I had to ask myself, how the heck did I get here? And I come from a family of at least 3 generations back, where the men on the Broze side of the family have drug addiction, have alcohol abuse, have prison. You know, all 3 of my birth father just died of a drug overdose last summer after struggling with drugs his entire life. You know, so I grew up visiting people in prison, being around drugs, being around this stuff. So when I found myself there, it was a real gut check of like, I've been mad at this guy my whole life for his drug problem, and here I am locked up for my own things, you know? So it really caused me to start to look inward, and I started with, I really kind of got into Buddhism at first, and specifically Zen meditation and Zazen. So I started to get my grandmother to send me just information on Buddhism and meditation and sitting, and in a place in prison, which I think is honestly the perfect place for it, because there's so much fear, there's so much insecurity. You see a lot of people, oh, well, you're the same color as me, so we're all going to clump together and hang out. You know, and people come to me, hey, you can't be talking to him, and you can't be hanging out with those people. And it's just a totally different environment, different culture, different, not a freedom culture, totally different backwards culture. And it was very difficult, but also I think, again, so necessary in that space to like, okay, I'm just going to go inward. At night, I'm sitting on my bunk, and I'm just trying to learn how to meditate and focus on like what's going on in my head. I hear people whispering about, what's that crazy dude up? What, you know, whatever they got to say. And just focused on like this. I'm looking at the calendar. I'm not going home for at least a year.
It was like the worst environment actually to start that, because like there was so much external forces pulling in all directions.
There's a lot of fear, man. There's a lot of that insecurity, but it was, and since then I've learned that there are an increasing amount of meditation programs in prison, which is where they're most needed. And I would love to go back to
probably school and prison. Not that school and prison have anything.
No, they're actually very similar. Honestly, honestly, schools are becoming increasing like prisons. Honestly, but I mean, I think
that's a whole other topic we could jump into. Right, is the education revolution that we so need on this planet right now.
Pull out from those centralized systems again, you know. But ultimately, it's about finding that space for yourself, because whether you're in prison, whether you're out here, honestly, I think it might be easier in prison because I get to pull away from the distraction of the cell phone, of the internet, of constantly being busy, right? It's harder, I think, for people who are out here in the everyday world, what when you're in prison you call the free world, when you have 20 devices around you pulling your attention in all these different places. But when you're in prison and you really have to strip down and bear down, and once you accept, I'm not going anywhere, you have nothing but yourself. So you can either avoid it, and some people do that, or you can go within. And that's what I chose to do, and that really set me on a new path. Once I got out of prison, I got into questioning a lot of the world and into all the things I'm doing now. But it started first with the internal battle, what I call the struggle against our internal tyrant, which is our doubts, fears, and insecurities, which we all have and which expresses itself in different ways for each person.
Powerful. Really powerful. That story is like the impressive truth of how life looks, right? Because what I know from my own journey is, in so many ways, I try to do the right thing or have the right words to say, and all that is also a form of pressure or fear, right? Mm-hmm. Because if I have a pressure that I need to perform in a certain way, I'm always going to listen to the external world to know where I'm at. Yeah. But for me, when meditation found me about 10 years ago, everything changed.
Sure.
It turned more and more inward. And then from the inward, I get that self-value, that worth, that joy, that spark. Yeah. And the curious thing that I find is, after 10 years of meditating, these are the people I start seeing and that come into my own reality. And then you must have a similar experience with just these incredible humans are walking this planet. We're 8 billion of us. And we said earlier in this conversation, some might have like darker agendas or different agendas or just agendas from a different place of consciousness.
Exactly.
That's maybe just like 60, 70 years old, you know? Yeah. And I think when we are working together and we do the self-work, the self-love, the healing work, the generational healing work, something else becomes available. Yeah. I don't even know exactly what it is, but it's like the emergent field opens. And we're given the choice, like the red pill or the blue pill,
sure. Right? Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right about that as far as just, I try not to think of things in terms of like, we're the good guys and these are the evil kind of corrupt people, as opposed to like what Buddhism taught me is just like to see things like as in their nature, as they are, right? And so for one reason or another, there are people who were manifested in this world to do things that when we look at, we say, I don't like that, that's bad. But that's also the inspiration that calls us to do good things, So without them, without they doing these other things, we wouldn't be here doing the things that we're trying to do. You know what I mean? So
I totally know what you mean. It's part of who we are at this point in time, I guess. I mean, we don't know really how the future is going to look, how evolution is going to shift that balance and polarity or maybe change the lower vibing end of pain and trauma into just a little less of it. But yeah, it's currently real. And if it's real in the now, then fighting it is, I believe, is not the right way forward. So that's why I personally love your choice of wording, like holistic activism. Activism is fucking sacred.
Yeah.
But activism and resistance just against doesn't really see that we're all one connected and ultimately are looking for a solution together.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to, bring it to people's attention that imagine you've got the whatever, the worst bad guy you can think in the planet, like say Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Monsanto, whatever kind of, people as activists often, they kind of idealize this person that they see as it's like the Monopoly man, this just like evil, or like Steven talks about Montgomery Burns from The Simpsons, like just that really bad guy. And imagine you have them right in front of you, right? And we've seen this like realistically, like for example in Libya and Iraq, when the leaders of those countries are disposed, and really horrible things has happened to them, where the people get them in their hands and they literally rip them to shreds, and they do horrible things to them. And I feel like that is going to be a very key moment. So imagine you've got this person that is responsible for all kinds of horrible things, and we finally got them here. It's like, what do we do in that moment? Do we turn into those same monsters and kill them, or do we hold them accountable and let them, face like, this is what you're responsible for. These are the things, and give them an opportunity for maybe even their own self-forgiveness, for maybe their own healing, because I feel like that's where the power really is. If we don't transmute that and turn it into something, the reason I talk about this is because revolution, it talks about revolving. That's the key word, revolving, going in circles. And so when we choose that same thing, we are going to continue to go in that circle. Yeah, and the question really becomes, is it a revolution or is it an evolution, which is part of the revolution, right? Even in the word. And then the circle turns into the spiral, and in the spiral there's a movement kind of almost like upwards. Yeah, exactly. Making like air marks here, quotation marks. I find this super curious because if you think of it on like a global level, this is kind of the state the world is still in. We're just continuing this war and imprisonment system, opposed to realizing, okay, what if we just hold you accountable and use your example in history, like let's say the last war in Iraq or Iran or the Holocaust or the many, many, many Holocausts that we had on this planet, and learn from it. Yeah. We learn that this is not the way to live. We learn this is not the way we want to be as human beings. Absolutely. And we use it to enlighten our children, our future generations, and say, look, this is how deep and this is how dark the human psyche can get if we're not fully expressed, if we're not allowing each other freedom. Exactly. And I think, again, like anything less than thinking about it in terms of holistic healing and holistically will likely, maybe we'll get to some point where it looks like success for a generation or two, but if we choose the methods of the past that have already failed us, maybe, maybe one or two generations, but we'll still end up where we're at now. We have to evolve past where we're at and the things we've been shown. And I think that's the beauty. That's why I do take hope with conversations like this and working with so many amazing people, literally from around the world. And like, I've had people ask me that, how do you do all the things you do and not get that just brought down? It's like, well, I'm connected to so many people. Just in the last month, met people from India, Australia, just all over, who are going home with their excitement to do things in their communities. And that gives me hope and passion to know that, for one, I'm not alone, and you're not alone. Everybody should remember they're not alone. You're definitely not alone. That's where I draw inspiration from, is just knowing that there's so many powerful people, and that we have the knowledge of all the great people of the past, and we have technology that's never existed before. And when used in a good way, a sacred, heart-centered way, we can do some amazing things. So that's where I take my inspiration from, and I just want to encourage more people to think about the issues holistically. When you see a problem, don't just point your finger that way, but point your finger back to yourself and say, how am I contributing to this, and what can I do to remove my support from that system? If you see something you don't like, don't just protest and react to it, but see how you can actively remove and support something new, something better. Beautiful. Derrick, such a pleasure to get to know you in Costa Rica, to hang out with you at all these various places we traveled in the last few days, and to be here right now in the jungle on the Pacific side of Costa Rica at Envision Festival. It's 2019. There's lots of work to do on this planet, and I'm really just stoked and happy to see there's people like you around. Absolutely, brother. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.